welcome to the Diane McClay Show, empowering life through choice. Get ready to discover new perspectives, motivation, and balance through Diane's compassionate storytelling and insightful discussions. Whether you're feeling stuck and discouraged or curious and looking for more possibilities, Diane has your back and she's ready to take you on a journey of self-discovery and expansion. Choice is powerful, and so are you. The Diane McClay Show starts now.
Welcome in, everybody, and happy Friday. Thank you for making the choice to find Transformation Talk Radio and the Cornelia Stephanie Media Network. I'm your host, Diane McClay, and you are tuning into the sponsored show, Living Beyond Your Diagnosis. And we are so lucky to have Cindy Lynn, who's an integrative life coach, with us again for the fourth and final episode. It's our encore episode where we are going to wrap everything up, put it in a nice little bow. And as my intro says, we're going to give you more possibilities about how you can live with a diagnosis, especially after you get the news that might throw you and your support network for a loop. Cindy Lynn is an integrative life coach, speaker, author. She's got 25 years worth of experience across many facets of the medical industry: healthcare provider, cardiac nurse, patient, working on the FDA side of testing medical devices, working in corporate America on the healthcare side. She really has a lot of the angles. And I've coined the phrase that she's the bridge between the old and the new, and she is the bridge between them and you. Them meaning the prescriptive care system and the efficient care system that we have, and you who wants to be the informed, savvy healthcare consumer. Cindy Lynn, welcome in. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited that our schedules could work together like this.
I know, right? And you call yourself the What Now nurse. So catch people up if they're just tuning in. We've had 4 parts to this series. Part 1 was philosophy of care. Part 2 was being a savvy consumer, meaning being able to make knowledgeable choices.
Yes.
Part 3 was healing the relationships that might be impacted by our diagnoses or the process when we're working through them. And today, part 4 is going to be about paying for your diagnosis. But give us a little catch up. Who are you? Why is this important? And give a couple bullet points on why people need to be tuning into this topic in their life.
Absolutely. So this is kind of the culmination. Like I said, I'm so glad this worked out with our schedules. I know that we had wanted to do something together in the future, and this all came together. So that's fabulous. I've gotten great feedback. We've gotten great questions from people, and like any learning opportunity, there's so much. And people go back to the very first radio conversation that we had here. They're like, okay, I've got this piece and I'm kind of catching on to this, but there's still that what now. So even if you've been paying close attention and we've given a tremendous amount of information, there's still that sense of what now. So the what now is call me and ask. If you've just gotten a diagnosis and you're not sure where to start, if you're in the midst of a diagnosis and it's not going according to your plan, it's not working out the way you want it to, and you're curious if there are other options, other paths, give me a call. That's where the what now comes in.
Right. And so we have a 1-800 number that TTR has established for us. If there are listeners out there who have a diagnosis and have a question, they can actually call 1-800-930-2819. Our producer and back-end guy, Jacob, will actually patch them into you directly where they can ask any question they want. Right now, you say that you're not their nurse, but you are a nurse. So give a little bit of background about why you are the number one person people should call when they get the diagnosis or when they bump up against something that they're struggling with and they just don't know where to go.
Absolutely. I'm the one person because, and I don't know of many other people out there doing what I'm doing. In fact, I don't know of any. And that is being the course navigator. So that doesn't mean I'm going to tell you what to do or what appointment to make next or what treatments to take. I'm going to empower you with information and with the confidence to make those types of decisions. And most of the other people within a similar role, like patient care coordinators, are employees of the hospitals or of the physicians, and their path that they can offer you and help you understand is very much just the one prescriptive path. I can offer you the questions to ask to discover all kinds of other paths. regardless of your diagnosis.
And you've said in our previous shows that it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is, whether it's cancer or a thyroid thing or a blood disease. It's not that you're going to specialize in each and everything, but the process is the same. Can you, while we're waiting to see if anybody wants to call in and talk to you at 1-800-930-2819, really, and to our audience, this is your chance. Like, you've got the What Now nurse on the line. Grab your phone. Maybe you've got a relative, a friend, a family member, a parent, a spouse who has a diagnosis or just got the news, and you're feeling overwhelmed. You're feeling scared. You're feeling unsure. But most of all, you might be feeling uninformed. And you might be asking yourself the question, what now? Give us a call and let's get you on the phone with Cindy Lynn, who is literally the bridge. She knows the system. So Cindy Lynn, let's just do a couple bullet points. What are the questions that you've been getting from people after we've been doing these shows, and what's coming up in your world?
A lot of questions about what kind of specialists. Since I shared my story about, and I think it's the second one or the third one, I forget, shared my story about getting a referral for a node, for a lump that was noticed on my thyroid, and being referred immediately to a surgeon. People are saying, how did you know who you wanted to see? How did you know that you didn't want to see a surgeon? Well, any specialist has a set of tools, and surgeons' tools generally are scalpels. Now, there's many sophisticated versions of those, but a surgeon's paradigm is removal. And that's very often not reversible. So I raise questions and offer opportunities of starting with things that are maybe more conservative therapies, knowing that you can start with a different therapy and then you could still do surgery after, typically. So for me, it was seeing a different kind of specialist, an endocrinologist, because that's who deals with thyroid problems. And a lot of times when people are in the midst of this, it's hard to remember that. It's hard to think about that. It's hard to know what to ask for. And if you're not in the midst of this, you may be sitting back thinking, well, that makes perfect sense. Anybody would do that. But I can tell you, even as someone who's this informed, when I get bad news, the steps aren't automatically there. That's when we talked about the power of that pause. So we can say, okay, let's think about this. What makes sense? And if you don't have stuff forthcoming, that's when you call.
You know, what you're saying, it's what's going through my mind while you're talking is I have a friend who's had two questionable results on a thyroid test, on a potential thyroid cancer test or a dysfunction with the thyroid. The test had come back inconclusive both times. So what would you say to that? Like, we don't have a diagnosis. It might be, it might not be, but we're still going to put somebody through the process. And I know that surgery is a recommendation on the table. If you were coaching this person, how would you attack the challenge of the unknown?
Mm-hmm. So first we'd find out who, sorry.
Hey, we've got two callers.
On that? Okay.
Yeah, let's pause on that.
We'll pause that. All
okay.
Right.
We got Gary from Buffalo and Nancy from New Jersey. Welcome into the show. Please ask your question. We got Cindy Lynn here to help you out.
Yeah, first off, we've got Gary calling in from Buffalo. Here we go, Gary.
Gary from Buffalo. Yes. Thanks for the call, Gary.
Hi, Gary. How can I help you?
Yes. Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. This is Cindy.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yeah.
we got you, Gary.
We
Go
got
ahead.
you.
I'm here.
Go ahead and ask your question,
Can you
Gary.
hear
We got Cindy Lynn on the line for you.
Can you hear me?
We can. Yep. Go ahead and ask your question, Gary.
This is Gary. Can you hear me?
Yeah. If we
Can
can't
you hear
get you, if we can't
Okay,
get you the
so
next
what's
time,
going
Gary,
on is, I'm sorry.
Hey, Gary, if you're listening to the show online right now, have you paused that while you talk to Diane and Cindy?
I did. I paused that.
Okay,
Yep. I put it on pause.
All right. Go ahead and ask your
How
question.
can I help you?
Yes, I have what's called allergic dermatitis, For the last 8 months, and the dermatologist only has prednisone and other steroids to give me. And I had a biopsy done, and the biopsy said contact dermatitis, but the itching is severe. It is 24/7 itching, so I'm scratching at it, and the skin is just so dry everywhere. And the only thing that they can give me is antihistamines, like what is it, hydroxyzine I get, and I get Allegra, and I get prednisone when it breaks out, but it's spread all over my body again. It seems to get into it seems to calm down. I don't know. They don't know what's causing it, and so it's kind of like fighting a forest fire with a garden hose.
The garden hose,
and
yes.
Now they want to put me on dupe. Oh, go ahead.
So yes, so I understand your frustration. Itching is something that is highly unrecognized as a very difficult thing to live with. So contact dermatitis is very much what it sounds like. You're coming in contact with something that's causing this irritation. So if I were to coach you, excuse me, if I were to work with you, I would of course have a lot more information on who you've seen and what tests you've been through. But we would also look at who can we help to find you, to guide you through a process of figuring out what it is that you're coming in contact with that's causing this, and going through an elimination type process. And I would have resources that we could talk about that further. Then we would also look at, subsequent to your skin being very dry and compromised, having that skin barrier compromised, what secondary type of situations can go on, potentially infections. And again, I don't know your case specifically. I'm not your healthcare professional, but these are the kind of questions, these are the different directions we can look in. So for example, the steroid is a great way to stop itching and to stop the body's response, or slow the body's response, the same as the antihistamines. It slows the body's response and says, okay, we're trying to put out the fire. There isn't really a fire. Something's going on. But again, it's only catching up. It's only addressing those symptoms. So fundamentally, to get to the root cause and then look at any complicating issues that have gone on, and then a plan to actually heal, so that even if you stop the contact with whatever it is, your skin barrier's been compromised, and there's a healing process that would need to go on. So that's kind of generally the approach we would take, is looking at the other aspects. And it doesn't mean that we would stop.
Do you have a phone? Do you have a phone number I can call you? I mean, after the call?
Sure. You can make an appointment to speak with me. The show notes will have the link, but my calendar link is also at my website at cindylynn.com. CYNDI.
Say that again, kind of a broken up on the phone. What's your website?
Sure. cindylynn.com.
Oh, Cindy Lynn.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And there'll be a place.
Yeah, what was it at?
I'm sorry?
Cindy Lynn, but Cindy Lynn, what was it at gmail.com?
No, just cindylynn.com is my website.
Oh, .com.
And there'll be a link there that
CINDYLY.
CYNDILYNN.com. And there'll be a link where you can book a free consult. Thank you for your call.
Okay, great, Cindy Lynn. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
And Gary, to that, one of the environmental things that you guys might look at is just even looking quite simply at the laundry detergent that you're using. Many laundry detergents have a lot of perfumes, dyes. I personally have gone to a natural laundry sheet without having a plastic bottle, but that may be one of the simplest environmental places to look at. So that would be my first suggestion, but I really strongly encourage you to connect with Cindy Lynn at www.cindylynn.com, CYNDILYNNE. And we lost Nancy, but Nancy, if you want to call back, we would love to hear your question. We'd love to support you. Sorry to make you wait there. So we're going to wait to see if Nancy will call back in. But to that point, environmental conditions, it might be soaps, it might be shampoos. I have a neighbor whose son is allergic to food dyes, right? So using Green Irish Spring soap, even though it's not a food dye, Green Irish Spring soap has perfume, it's got dye in it, it's got all sorts of things that might actually extract all that moisture from the skin and break down that protective barrier, right, Cindy Lynn? I'm not a doctor, but just saying.
No, and it's a multiple layer thing, because something starts and then the body has its own mechanism. So you really kind of have to peel back the layers of what's going on. And sometimes physicians take the time to do that. But again, the secondary, tertiary kind of things that happen, because he said this has been going on for such a period of time. Once the skin is broken, there's an opportunity for other microbes to start taking over. So it really takes more of a holistic approach. And so knowing what questions to ask and who to ask them of is important.
And you're the person to ask those questions, because even though you might not know very specifically about that thing, what you're trying to let people know is you're the person who can say, I can be the triptych. We used that phrase before. I'm the AAA triptych between the medical world and the layman who may or may not have all the ways to ask the questions. You may not know what all the details of the illness, the diagnosis, the disease, or the condition, but you know the questions to ask, and you have strategic steps that you would take your clients through on the back end, off the air, to really kind of create a plan, right?
Yes, and to who? So I am not the person who would necessarily lead him through a complete, elimination diet, if that was what was called for. Like you said, there's layers of different environmental things that go on. There's also different skin checks that you may potentially want to see if once the skin's broken down, there isn't some fungal or other kind of activity that has taken over. So it's very complex. So knowing what questions to ask and where to start seeking help makes a difference.
And one of the questions people can ask is what else is going on, right? In the interest to the show, we talked about what are the possibilities? What are the options? So you would be able to help Gary find a specialist that might look at elimination diets, environmental assessments, deeper skin issues. So it sounds like this was a great call. And Gary, thank you for calling in. Nancy, if you're still listening, we'd love to have you call back. We'll make sure that we make room for you in the call. We're on until 2:00. That number you can reach us at is 1-800-930-2819. We'd love to hear from you if you've got a question, not specifically about the thing that's going on, but if you have a question for Cindy Lynn about how she can help you find new possibilities and get new information and become more knowledgeable about the condition you have, the diagnosis that's been given to you, or even about the process of working through a diagnosis. That's 1-800-930-2819. So let's jump back in. We were at the point where we were asking about what are the questions are people bringing up to you. We were talking about thyroid, and I think the question I was leading into was, what do you do with the unknown? Things are inconclusive.
So first you look at which tests have been run and who's been running them. So if you have a general practitioner or a family doctor, chances are he is not running, either having access to or knowing how to interpret the more complex in-depth tests that an endocrinologist would run. And knowing to look at the specific interplay of all of the different things you can measure with the thyroid test. Generally, there's just a couple that are done if it's part of your routine annual checkup kind of blood work. There's a lot more deeper tests that can be done. There's a lot more that can be done that look at thyroid antibodies, for example, that look at parathyroid function, that look at the other glands in relationship to how things are in balance. And that sometimes gives you the rest of the picture. And even if things are inconclusive, you want to know what's the plan. Is it you are symptomatic and what are we going to do about that? Or you're not symptomatic, These tests were just kind of found as part of a normal course of action. When do we follow up? What are symptoms to watch for? Those kinds of things.
Great, thanks for that. So again, we have Cindy Lynn. I'm claiming her as the bridge between them, who is the industry and the system and the doctors that are prescribing a certain place of care, and you. She is the bridge between old and new. Old is, hey, listen to your doctor, don't ask any questions, do the next thing that's in the step, and we hope everything will work out okay for you. The new is being informed, being a savvy consumer, asking questions, looking for options, looking for possibility. So I coined the phrase between the old and the new, and between them and you, because the show is literally about making sure we put the power in your hands, right? Giving you the opportunity to slow down, pause, assess the situation, and figure out your plan of action. Cindy Lynn, before we got on the call, you were talking about kind of the parallel between the financial piece of the medical system and the personal awareness, that we're often driven by what our insurance will cover, what our insurance will says is okay or not okay in terms of what they pay for. But there's actually an interesting paradigm about what happens if people end up choosing alternatives that they pay for out of their pocket. Do you want to dig into that a little bit about, we kind of titled the show Paying for Your Diagnosis? I'd like to uncover that a little bit.
Sure. So I'm going to start by taking a step back and talking about the protocol-based medicine that you alluded to just in the end there, because there's an important component that goes with this. And that is that MDs, in order to maintain their license and their practice, are required to practice to standard of care. And standard of care very specifically says, if your cholesterol level is this, then this medication is offered. If your blood pressure is this, then this medication is offered. If you want to do something different and even stay within standard of care, then you must actively refuse. So if patient refuses to take this drug or do this, then the physician can look at the next option. If the patient doesn't refuse, that's the prescription that's written, that's what you're sent home with. Now, if you don't take the drug, the doctor doesn't necessarily know that, and nothing advances. So the physicians are operating under standard of care, which statistically shows the intention to help the most people in the most efficient way. And even if you want to stay within that paradigm and listen to your physician, you can refuse individual steps and ask what's next. So I just want to say that, because that generally stays standard of care within your insurance and all of that. I'll call it normal, traditional kind of stuff. Then did you have a question about that?
I just want to know, how do you do that? I mean, it sounds so simple to say, I refuse the standard operating normal care, but how do you do that? How do you refuse the care that somebody in an authority has provided for you when they have more information about what's going on than you do?
Well, in the same way as we approach it when we want a second opinion, we don't say, Diane, no, I don't want what you're offering. We say, okay, this is the drug you're prescribing. I'm concerned about this because I've heard that there's a lot of side effects to it. I'm aware of this about it. I'm aware of that about it. What are my other options? And that at that time, the physician may say, let's try this for 1 month. We'll monitor for these these things. And then you're actively working with him. Or you say, him or her, or you say, I do not want a prescription at this time. I want to remain under your care. I want to continue to monitor this. What other lifestyle changes can I do? What other courses of action do I have? Is there a procedure for this rather than a pill? Any of those kinds of things. So you want to remain engaged. You aren't telling them, go jump in a lake, but you're taking agency over your treatment and participating. And very often, occasionally you'll get a doc that's like, forget that if you don't want to do it, but they'll be like, oh, okay, maybe she knows something about this. Oh, she is interested. Oh, maybe she actually will make those lifestyle changes because she's the one that brought them up. So it opens options. It doesn't have to be adversarial.
And thanks for that clarity. And I think as you're talking, it circles me right back to that pause. This isn't instantaneous. It's not like the doctor gives you the, okay, this is the next thing we're going to do. Refusal of care could be, hey, I'm not ready to do that right now.
Mhm.
What are my other options? Right. So it's not instantaneous. It could be, but it's not like, it really brings me back to that importance of slowing down and what we talked about in our earlier shows, building a relationship with our care professionals, making sure they have a clear understanding of what our philosophy of care is for ourselves, which is why people need to call you first and figure out what that is, right? Let's get that philosophy of care down, or at least at least get a concept of it before we seek care, and make sure that our medical professionals and our support team know what that
What that
is. Then that opens the door to that, wait, I'm not sure I want to take that drug just yet. Or could you give me more information about it before we just start the treatment, right?
Yeah. And another really good example of that is when people are diagnosed with hypertension. A lot of people get nervous going to see the doctor. If there's discussion of other things, if there's worry of other things, or just that whole process. And then you add on top of it now that people are still having to go by themselves rather than with a spouse, and all of these kind of hoops we have to jump through. And very often people's blood pressure will be high in the doctor's office.
Right.
And they may let you sit for 15 minutes and they may take it again. And then they may want to prescribe a drug. To counter that, you could say, listen, I'm feeling pretty nervous. I will keep track. I will take my blood pressure at the drugstore with my own blood pressure cuff. They're inexpensive. You can get them on Amazon. I'll take my blood pressure 3 times a day and I'm going to record it for 2 weeks, sitting at home. And then if those numbers still appear elevated, we'll talk about what we can do about it. So that's another way to acknowledge, yes, he has a concern about these numbers. And if you're living day to day with high blood pressure, that's one thing. But if you're nervous and your blood pressure is a little bit high in the doctor's office, that's actually pretty normal. And if you take drugs for that, you may actually drop your blood pressure dangerously low when you're home at a common level. And that happens very often with elderly people. And that's how many of them become over-medicated.
Right. And it gets us into that cycle of getting one medication and then getting another medication to treat the effects of the first medication. So we're going to take a break here in just another minute. We're talking with Cindy Lynn, who is an integrative life coach, and she is a healthcare professional that's had 25 years of experience. And we really want to engage you. We're trying to put the information in your hands about your diagnosis and how you can live the life you want to live. After the break, we're going to give a minute here. We want to queue up any caller that has a question for Cindy Lynn. You can call us at Transformation Talk Radio, 1-800-930-2819. That's 1-800-930-2819. We'd love to have a call queued up when we come back from our break to help you put the power in your hands to live the way you want to live. I'm Diane McClay. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Diane McClay, and we are talking with Cindy Lynn, who's an integrative life coach and has had 25 years of experience in the medical world on both sides, as a cardiac nurse, as a patient, as somebody on the testing for FDA medical devices, and somebody who's worked in corporate America. Cindy Lynn is talking today about paying for your diagnosis, and we'd love to queue up a caller and ask her some questions. 1-800-930-2819 is the number that we'd love you to call if you have a question about a diagnosis that you've been given. And we won't go into specific details. We'd love to invite you to Cindy Lynn's website, www.cindylynn.com. That's CYNDILYNNE.com. CindyLynn.com is where you can connect with her more directly about the details. But in general questions, if you have a question about what we're talking about, living beyond your diagnosis, the steps that we're trying to put in your hands to empower you, give us a call, 1-800-930-2819. Our producer will put you through directly to Cindy Lynn. Cindy Lynn, before the break, we were just starting to go down the road of saying no to your doctor and refusing care, which you spelled out rather nicely. And we were talking about making sure that we circle back to the pause, making sure that we know what our philosophy of care is, so that if a step or a procedure is prescribed and we're not sure about it, when we need more information, we can actually step back and say, hey, I'm not ready for that. What else is next? Right? So let's kind of dive into that whole paying for your diagnosis conversation. What is it we need to know today about what that means to a healthcare provider and what that could mean to the person seeking the help?
Absolutely. The whole landscape of medical insurance, healthcare insurance has changed a lot over the last few years. It used to be the kind of thing where you went to the doctor, you didn't necessarily see a bill, everything was covered, and you didn't really have to think about it. And then the movement changed towards a little bit more visibility, co-pays, um, inside coverage, outside of area coverage, all of those kinds of things. And then most recently has been the very high deductible insurance plans, where your insurance coverage is essentially for catastrophic type large surgeries, trauma, that kind of thing. But for the most part, you end up paying out of pocket for the day-to-day stuff. And that's been good and bad. It's been a huge adjustment for people. And I think it's caused people to think about whether or not they're going to seek help, which has its pros and cons. But the other part that it's done is made people much more aware of who they're working with. And it's interesting because this is sort of the point that many of my clients arrived at when I first started seeing them in my office, in my physical practice for muscle activation techniques. And they would come to me and pay out of pocket, pay cash, because they had tried everything else. And so at that point, they were like, all right, this is what we're going to do. The compliance, and that's kind of an iffy word, but the ability of those people to find the time to make the appointments, to do the exercises was so much greater than what I saw when there was insurance paying for things like physical therapy.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's this paradigm of I'm going to go to the doctor and the doctor and the insurance company are going to fix me. Kind of like if you get your car in a crash. You take it into the shop, the insurance company fixes it, and that's that. And if insurance was covering everything, you kind of took what was offered and what was paid for, and you didn't know to seek anything else. Now, as more and more people are seeing that, well, technically my insurance does cover this, but my deductible is $5,000 or $10,000, and this visit is $200 or $400. So I am essentially paying for it out of pocket. I'm going to pick a practitioner. I'm going to pick someone who I have the most faith can give me the most for that money. And it's making people much smarter consumers, which in the end is good for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked before, and I think we came to agreement on this, that they're more invested when they pay out of pocket. I know I am. If I know that I'm going to someplace for a service and I hand money, I have an expectation. I almost become more engaged in the process. I have a really good relationship with my mechanic, and there have been some things that didn't meet warranty or didn't, it was like, well, like my windshield cracking. Is it really worth filing an insurance claim when I'm just going to have to pay for the deductible anyway? And I know that I ask my mechanic more questions when I'm literally handing cash to them. It's almost like I feel like I've earned the right to ask those questions. It sounds kind of weird to say it that way, but because I work hard for my physical money and I make a choice that I'm going to spend my physical money on this thing, chiropractor, massage, muscle activation techniques, yoga classes, anything that I feel is going to augment my personal life, if I pay for a yoga class, I'm actually going to go to the class.
Mhm.
If I just say I'm going to do a freebie online, I can be like, yeah, I don't feel like doing that today. But there's this concept of wanting to get what I paid for, right? Is that, I mean, you find that in your experience in the medical world as well?
Yes, it's absolutely been my experience. The concept will be offensive to some people. Some people don't want to talk about money at all. They want healthcare to just magically be this thing that appears that's above money or beyond money. But I can tell you, when my clients are paying me, I don't double book them. I very, very rarely run late, and that it has to be a huge emergency. I respect their time. They respect my time. We're choosing to work together, and the results are amazing. There is never people stacked up in the waiting room at my office waiting for their name to be called, kind of stuck. They can't get up and leave because they need their appointment. They can't. That doesn't happen in situations like we talk about. I'm sure it doesn't happen with your chiropractor.
It doesn't.
Yes, someone can run a few minutes late. You get people who are less mobile that take a little bit longer to get their coat on and get moving. But we're talking about a few minutes and a pleasant experience. We're not talking about a waiting room of people who are just stacked up waiting for what can be handed to them. And still paying a lot for that. That's the other piece, is it's not the free option versus the paid option here in the United States. It is, and to be honest, I've worked in Canada as well, and there is a difference in what you pay for as opposed to what is just part of a system. And maybe that's unfortunate. It is the reality. And what I found is clients who are invested enough to give their money are invested in getting the results, and it's a win-win.
Right. And I want to do a call out to Nancy in New Jersey. If you're still listening, we'd love to have you call back at 1-800-930-2819. We want to hear what you're thinking about this conversation about paying for your diagnosis and being invested in your health, making a choice to put the possibilities into your hands and put the power of knowledge into your hands. You can call us at 1-800-930-2819. That's Transformation Talk Radio. Call in number. You're talking with Cindy Lynn, who's an integrative life coach and has 25 years of medical experience on all across the board. And I'm telling you, folks, you got to take advantage of being able to connect with Cindy Lynn, at least for the free consultation call that she has available on her website, because this is cutting edge stuff. This is, maybe other people are doing it, but Cindy Lynn's the only one that I know who is doing it. And I put my stamp on her as being compassionate, kind, knowledgeable, forthcoming, affordable. I know you've got a limited time coaching package for $497 or right around there. I can't quote your price exactly,
Yep.
but we're talking about, you're going to pay for it on one end or the other, right? I mean, if you take prescriptive drugs, there's going to be a cost to that physically, maybe emotionally, mentally, and might affect your body long term. Or you could put some of the money up front and empower yourself to get the information you need to live the life you want and have options and solutions, right, Cindy?
And it works both ways. There are times with clients that we discover a lot of new options. There's times where we look and we say, okay, what have you done so far? And it's like, great. And people can feel really good about how far they've gotten themselves, about what they've learned, about the questions they've asked. And then together we take it to the next level for the outcomes they want. So it really is, health throughout our entire life is an iterative process. And when you hit a snag and you can't do that growth by yourself, then get some help.
Right.
That's
right.
what we're here for.
Exactly. So where else do you want to lead the conversation? I mean, we're talking about money, we're talking about finances, insurance coverage. You mentioned before the break that we can say no, and we actually have to refuse the initial level of care in order to be able to start seeking additional options. But to do that in a respectful, relationship-oriented way with your healthcare provider, where else do you want to take this conversation? What do we need to share with people so that they have the power?
Just the importance of having agency, the importance of taking that ownership for your own health. So when you asked about some of the questions I've gotten, there have been over the months a lot of questions about vitamin D and the importance of vitamin D levels. And as someone who, like yourself, who spends as much time outdoors, I'm sure you can tell immediately when you aren't. And over again, physicians are refusing to order vitamin D tests because they may not be covered by insurance. They may not be covered by Medicare. It depends on how they're coded. It's a whole kind of a thing. Uh, and yet it's so easy to do yourself. You can order kits very reasonably, stick your finger, put the drops of blood, send it back in the mail, and get a result. And with that result, you can very easily, for example, supplement vitamin D and its cofactors. And the whole process is going to be under $100. And that, it's not, there's a word ableist that gets thrown around a lot now about, oh, well, apparently Cindy Lynn thinks $100 isn't anything. Compared to what it takes to get something done in the medical system when they simply don't want to do the test, and knowing you can up your immune system and prevent so many other illnesses with adequate vitamin D levels, it's a very small price to pay. So that would be something that I would save up to do.
And it's comparative,
Mhm.
right? So if you don't spend $100 out of your pocket to do a simple vitamin D test, but your insurance covers medicines that handle depression, anxiety, mental stress, mental health disorders. Once you get on that level of prescriptive medicine, you're probably going to be on it for a while. I would imagine that even with a copay or the best insurance you have, you're going to pay more than $100 in the year to sustain that prescriptive care. I'm just guessing. I don't know for a fact. I'm not an expert, but again, it's kind of like if you pay for it up front, the worst that's going to happen if you spend $100 on a vitamin D test is you're going to get information that says, nope, you're fine. Okay, so now you can go to your doctor and say, I've done a vitamin D test, and that seems to be normal. What's next?
Right. And the test isn't that much. I was talking about the test, buying the vitamin D and the cofactors. So
Right.
your test and your treatment for 3 months, ballpark. And I understand, and I'm guessing that most of your listeners are the kind of people who want to take agency, who want to take responsibility. If you are fine with what's going on in the system, with what's going on with your physician, that's great. There's no need to make any changes. But if you want to make changes, Transformation Talk Radio is a great way to do it. The KS Media group is a great way to do it. And call, and I can help you make those changes as well.
Right. So that's a good lead in. If you're looking to make changes in your life and your lifestyle, if you're looking to live healthier and be more informed and feel more empowered, this is your time. We've got about 25 minutes left of the show for you to call in and talk to Cindy Lynn, the integrative life coach, right now, 1-800-930-2819. If you have any questions at all, we'll try to answer them on the air. And if we can't answer them on the air, we'll definitely hook you up with Cindy Lynn's email or her website where you can schedule a free consult. But I can't say enough, you can operate in status quo. We're not saying that's bad. We're not saying that's a terrible thing. But if you want to change, if you want to be a savvy advocate of the healthcare system, if you want to just be informed about different options that you can have, what we know to be true is our health, that the way we knew we lived at 21 is not the same we live at 31 or 41 or 51. So trust me, folks, when I tell you this, that something is going to change in your life. Doesn't mean you're going to have cancer. It doesn't mean you're going to have a thyroid issue or something really severe, but Our bodies are designed to change. The chemistry in our bodies are designed to change. Gary, when he talked about his dermatitis, obviously he didn't live with that condition his whole entire life. Something in his environment or something around him is causing this condition, and he's taking the power in his own hands to call in and say, what do I do? I feel like I need different information. So give us a call, 1-800-930-2819. Talk to Cindy Lynn. Let's get those questions out there and let's get you on the road to living beyond your diagnosis. Right, Cindy?
Absolutely. And with your permission, I would like to talk about one of the most difficult things to talk about when we talk about taking agency and planning, and that is end of life planning. And I don't know the demographic of a Transformation Talk Radio, but I know that any of us who are daughters or sons or cousins or aunts or uncles, that we're going to have people with whom we're going to experience their end of life. And a lot of us are approaching ours if we have terminal illnesses. And how we plan for that, how we orchestrate that, has all of the same components as how we deal with the diagnosis. And by definition, that can be the stopping of all treatments. That can be the decisions to move to palliative care. That can be a decision to really go into a type of respite situation. And that's another area that really scares people to talk about and scares people to plan for. And so I think, I'd open the questions up to that as well and let people know that that is something you can plan for as well. What do you want done? Who do you want around you? Where do you want your last days or weeks or months to happen? What are the facilities that can be put in place to make that happen? How do you get caregivers? All of those kinds of things. There are experts out there that do this. But if you don't know how to look for them, if you don't know what to ask for, and you don't know what the options are, it often leaves you finishing things in a way that doesn't reflect how you lived at all.
It's a very compassionate point, and it's a very, we need to build a show around this because there are so many layers to end of life and quality of end of life and decisions. It's not even just what decisions should you be making or how do you inform people, but what happens when one decision is made and it creates a trickle down effect for another. For example, palliative care is completely different than hospice care. And when you make the decision to go into hospice care, and we don't have the time to get into this today, but I encourage you to connect with Cindy Lynn and we can have a conversation off the air. And if you schedule one of her free consults, if you have questions about this, she can guide you on this. But once you make the decision to go to hospice care, there are systematic things that kick in that stop other types of support and other types of care. And I only know this because, my partner actually managed both palliative and hospice care for her mother. And, when you're in the moment and you're trying to make a decision, and there's the threat of losing someone that you care about, your mind may not be as sharp as it normally is when it's not stressed. There might be a lot of things that you're just scared to ask, but you don't know how. But the process was, you need to call hospice. Well, she had no awareness that as soon as you engage hospice, other services fall off. They wane out because hospice now supersedes whatever support care has been happening. Am I translating this the right way, Cindy? You're nodding your head.
Yes. So probably one of the best ways, being that we just had that whole physician standard of care, you see this number, you prescribe this drug. When you go into a hospice situation, that standard of care no longer applies, which means they no longer have to give you this prescription for this reading. Now they can look and say, all right, is this causing you pain? Is this causing you symptoms that we want to make you more comfortable? If not, we aren't going to chase treating these things. We aren't going to chase curing these things because it's no longer required as part of that standard of care. And as a nurse, working with very compassionate physicians, there was often a sense of relief when an individual or an individual's family would make that decision. Because I promise you, a lot of the nurses in the hospital don't want to be giving nasty chemo to 95-year-old people who are terribly, terribly ill and have no quality of life. Now, that's not necessarily just a judgment call on my point. It's just hard to make somebody sicker when there isn't ever the prospect of them getting up and going home.
Especially when the Hippocratic Oath directly states that you
Right.
won't cause any harm. You
Right.
you won't
So
you will
if
do
that
your
individual,
best, right, to
yes,
not make it worse.
right,
So I interrupted you, but I think it's important that if you don't understand what we're talking about philosophy of care, either while you're healthy and before you get sick, or philosophy of care after you have a diagnosis, or philosophy of care about the quality of life you want as you're living with a diagnosis or as you end your life, please give us a call. Connect with Cindy Lynn. She is amazing. She knows way more than all of our shows can cover. And she can guide you to the people that can get you the answers and help you feel a sense of relief.
and that's a big part of it, having that sense of relief of, okay, we have a plan in place. And again, it's not my judgment that's going to drive this. It's you knowing, if I choose hospice, these are the paths that open. And anytime, of course, that we choose one path, we leave others behind. If I don't want to choose hospice, if I want to continue to get treated for everything, that's an option here too that we have in the States, which is wonderful. And it's up to the person. And then, of course, as the person becomes less able to make those decisions, it's up to the family very often. And that's where the importance of knowing your philosophy of care, of knowing that your mother or father would not want to be in the bed in that situation, unable to communicate, and still being put through all kinds of treatments. There are people who, I recently went through the situation with a family member where some of the siblings had thought that having their mother go into hospice was about the same as assisted suicide. I mean, they were just very adamant that everything should be done right up until it can't be anymore. And that was a very difficult challenge within that family. And unfortunately, by that point, the parent was unable to mediate that. So it was a very, very challenging and difficult time, stacked onto a challenging and difficult time, because those conversations weren't there. People didn't know to have them. And if I can do anything, it's assist people in having those conversations.
Well, I know for a fact you can do that and you have done that, and this is your calling. I think all of your years of service to the medical world on all sides has called you to this point. I live by a phrase that says, I believe that everything I have done up until this exact moment in my life is leading to me to the very next moment that's going to show up for me. And I think that might be true for you. I know you're the person who can create those questions and create that plan and give the level of support. I absolutely know this is why you are doing this sponsorship of my show, and it's why you're showing up in the world to make sure that you can empower people with the knowledge that you have. I absolutely know that.
It's a blessing all the way around.
Absolutely. So let's make sure that we tell people how they can connect with you. I know that you have a free consultation that they can schedule an appointment with you. Let's give people the details on how they can really get into a deeper conversation with you about all of these topics we've been covering.
Probably the best way is cindylyn.com if you want to book a time. If you want to reach out by email, that's very easy as well. It's cindy@cindylyn.com. And I think that's in the show notes as well, and has been in the other ones. So if you can't find one, you can find another one. and just reach out. Just Google and I will be there for you.
I love hearing that. Just Google her and she'll be there. For folks that are listening, if you go to my YouTube channel, just Google YouTube with Diane McClay. We have made a separate playlist with all of Cindy Lynn's interviews on the sponsored show. We have also pulled out small snippets of these conversations, 2, 3, 5-minute segments that have really good juicy nuggets in it. I'm going to put the call to action out there. I'm going to be blatant. Go to my YouTube channel, subscribe, go to the Cindy Lynn playlist. It's going to say Living Beyond Your Diagnosis. Watch what we put there. If you haven't seen all 4 of our episodes, 5, including the one with Cornelia Stephanie, start there. Start from the beginning and watch them all the way through, and then reach out to us. You can always send me a text. Do LBYD, Living Beyond Your Diagnosis, at 503-317-8072. Let me know you heard the show and that we're impacting your life and that you want to put the power in your hands. Cindy Lynn, last word.
Thank you so much. Thank you for helping to get this word out there and all the good work that you do.
Well, thank you. And this has been a pleasure and an honor, and I expect that we will be working together again at some point.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. This is Transformation Talk Radio on the Cornelia Stephanie Media Group Network. And if you want more of Cindy Lynn or me, download the Cornelia Stephanie Media Group app, click on the directories, and you can find both of us there with more information about us. Thanks for tuning in. Happy Friday.
Thank you for listening to The Diane McClay Show, where you are empowered to enact change in your life through choice. You know that little voice in your head that's been telling you to pursue that passion project? Or maybe it's been screaming for you to go outside and explore the great outdoors. That voice is you, and you deserve to be heard. Listen, make a choice, make a change, and watch yourself grow. For more information about Diane or to work with her personally, visit dianemcclay.com.